This episode of Between the Highs podcast is brought to you by Story Oak Media, visual storytellers in Savannah and the Lowcountry.
Welcome to Between the Highs, life behind the logo. This isn't a podcast about overnight success. It's about the long road that came before it. Here we sit down with small business owners from our community and talk about the parts of life you don't see on social media. We talk about the hardships that changed them, the lessons that stayed, the things they wish they could go back and tell their younger selves. Because most of life doesn't happen at the peaks. It happens in between. That's where the real stories live, between the highs, life before the logo. Hey, I'm Mack Ridgeway with Ridgeway Roofing. Today on Between the Highs, I have Matt Campbell with me. He is the president of Georgia Matters. Is a lobbyist that works directly with Georgia government, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say today.
Cool, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
Happy to be on the show.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Most people would like to know, right? Because we look at government and most of us don't really understand how government works. And I believe a lot of policy starts with people like you, right? Lobbyists. So what does a lobbyist do?
So we get people, groups, communities, what they want. But, that sounds maybe a little cheesy, but really that's what it is. And what someone wants obviously would be to better their situation. So that's funding for schools, funding for hospitals, roads, bridges. That's one way to look at it. That's better incentives for your business to come here, like things like the tax credit that brings Hyundai here or other large employers. Those are things that lobbyists advocate for to make happen. You're selling a product, and that product could be a business, a community, or it could be like a nonprofit or a cause. Suicide awareness, American Cancer Society, Blood Cancer United, all those types of things. So your big organizations, the nonprofits, they have teams that advocate, and they recruit volunteers. Your big businesses usually have staff people that lobby. And then those groups, whether it be Delta Airlines or the Savannah Ports or NBC Universal or Paramount Plus TV, they'll employ contract lobbyists, which is what I do. So there are several versions of me at the state capitol, and we represent different clients. We could represent them for a month, or we could represent them, for decades. And what we do is we monitor and watch legislation, and then we help the lawmakers get the facts to develop policy that's good for people and not bad. We try to stop bad things that would either hurt a business or hurt someone that we're speaking up for, or make some changes and tweaks that would benefit our clients.
So is there like a good lobbyist and a bad lobbyist? Like, is there a good team and a bad team, right? So you've got Hyundai. Me and my family spend a lot of time on the Ogeechee River.
Yeah.
Like my favorite thing to do after work is to go put my John boat in up near Blitchton and run as fast as I can. And when the Hyundai plant comes in, that can be difficult, for a lot of people, but it can also be a huge benefit for a lot of people. So is there a lobbyist that represents the people that are like, we don't need to destroy the swamp, we need to keep this? Or is it more funneled through who has the most money?
Well, that's multifaceted. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Well, there's a bunch of sides. You hear two sides of every issue, but actually there's a lot more than that, right?
For sure.
And so, yes, there are advocacy groups and people that would convey and do convey. One of them is like the Ogeechee Riverkeeper would be somebody that would advocate. And then Okefenokee Riverkeeper and Sierra Club and those environmentalist club, they have a heavy presence in speaking up, and they do a great job. And you got, as a taxpayer, we belong to a local government in the community. And so they're also advocating and employ people. And so that's where local government and local politics are so important. When you elect people, that they're going to carry the wishes that you send them, because if they're employing people to be on a different side than you like, that's where it comes in. But there's good
information. Right?
Yeah, it depends on what you describe as bad. But a good lobbyist is someone who tells the truth and who tries to bring everybody in to the room in front of the lawmaker, and so that all sides can be heard, and then you can come to an agreement.
Would it be fair to say that facts can be paid for?
No.
Okay. That's good.
No, you know, political campaign contributions are real. I'm sure everybody right now is getting flooded with mail and bad TV commercials.
Mhm.
Um, that is to get that candidate's name in front of voters, right?
Mhm.
I mean, you see somebody's name 2 million times. Oh, they must have some credibility. They must know what they're talking about. They got a great story. They overcome so much, and now they want to be whatever.
Yeah.
Lobbyists pay for some of that, but in special interest groups, but also everyday people. You probably get texts sometimes from different parties, Republican and Democrat, raising money, and that's unfortunately the nature of the political game in America. It is a lot of money in it. It takes money to get reelected. You got to
Yeah.
get your name out there with TV signs and so on,
Right.
and but the money is that you contribute and that kind of thing is basically to help a campaign and to, it's not to buy a vote or buy anything like that. It's to get access, right? If there's an event or if there's a big whatever informational seminar, if there's some type of event going on that costs money to go to, if you want to be in the room, just like any other event, you got to contribute to get in there. And so the main role, it isn't to give money to get access, it's to get the client or the group you're speaking for in front of that lawmaker so they have an opportunity to be heard. And especially where we're at, Bryan County, Savannah area isn't rural. We were, Pembroke, they would say was rural. When you think rural, you think like Americus, Georgia, or, middle Georgia somewhere. We're rural compared to Atlanta. Basically anybody below McDonough, I would say, is kind of rural, right? And so there's so many people up there, so much of the state's budget and so much of the attention is drawn there. And so really communities and businesses and all that, you really need someone to advocate, to get some attention down here because these folks in Southeast Georgia, coastal Georgia matter too.
Yeah. I can tell by listening to you talk, like there's a lot of passion in what you do. Like I get the feeling just from sitting here talking with you, I can feel the energy where it's not a job. Like I don't feel like you speak as if this is something you just do for a living. There's more to it. So you're from Richmond Hill?
Yep, from Savannah, and then we moved to Richmond Hill when I was in first grade in the '80s. I think 1987.
Wow.
Yep.
What's your oldest memory of Richmond Hill?
My oldest memory would actually be before I lived here. Not long before I lived here, but I remember we lived in Savannah off of Montgomery Crossroads, down toward Lake Mare. And I remember we went on vacation, and so we hopped in the back of my parents' station wagon, and it seemed like we were in the car forever. And we went to this beautiful special campground, and I found out later that it was the KOA on 17.
Oh, wow.
I
Yeah.
thought we were in Florida somewhere. So
Right.
that was probably my first memory. My next memory would be probably the old Shores Piggly Wiggly,
Mhm.
so which is now Just Beverage and Omelet House and all that was the only grocery store at the time. And even when I was a teenager, you could go there and your mom could write you a check for $20 on a Friday night and they cash it for you
Yeah.
and all that kind of good stuff. And then Dinky Miners on the corner where Walgreens is. They had turkey shoots, and that's where a lot of old guys would hang out. And a couple of buddies of mine's fathers had tabs up there. So you'd pull up there and get Mountain Dew and Cheez-Its or whatever,
Yeah.
pack of crackers, and put it on your friend's dad's tab. That was pretty cool. My dad was too cheap. He didn't do that.
He didn't have a
No, I
tab.
didn't have the tab.
Yeah. So what, if you could kind of summarize what it was like to grow up? I mean, I've coastal Georgia is a special, it's a special place. I enjoy traveling. And I was in the Navy and I got to go and I mean, I've been to multiple different countries. Any opportunity me and my wife get, whether it's just us or with the kids to go somewhere, we do. Like, man, there's just something when you pull up to St. Catharines and throw an anchor out. It's it's like no other place. So, um, how would you summarize your experience growing up here in coastal Georgia in the Richmond Hill area? What was that? What was that like? What was special about that?
I guess one word would be blessed.
Mm,
And uh, I can't imagine growing up anywhere else. And one of the regrets I have as a parent is that uh, 2012 I moved, and we had a great experience. But I moved my little family from Strathy Hall, the neighborhood I lived up in. At the time, we lived in the back in Mill Hill,
mhm.
amazing on the marsh.
Yeah.
You know, we had a little tidal creek with a little john boat and trees and mud and my boys and daughter. You know what I mean? It's paradise in Richmond Hill, coastal Georgia. And I moved them because I was lobbying at the Capitol and never lived anywhere but Richmond Hill and Savannah for a brief time, to Atlanta, the big city, which seemed like a great opportunity. And it was, and we had a wonderful time. But over those years, you just felt the pull to come back here and you realize how special this place is. And like you said, the marsh and pulling up to St. Catherine's by boat, and everyone, going to church on Sunday, then going out to a barrier island to hang out, to talk with friends, and, just smell that salt water. It's unique. So,
Yeah.
I'd say, growing up here it was fun and amazing and glad I got to do it.
What were your parents like?
Far as,
Just in general.
oh,
Just,
they were cool. So they're both in heaven now. My old man was a railroad conductor for 40 something years. He graduated Savannah High School in 1960.
so let me think. So your dad was a railroad conductor for 40 years. So what year would that have been when he was getting started?
1960.
1960. Okay.
No, excuse me, 62. He graduated high school in 62. And then the Oglethorpe Mall, you know where that is?
Mhm.
He worked there at a pet store. So it's called Doctor's Pets back then. So kind of in the Oglethorpe Mall where Levy's Jewelers in, there's a little hallway and it was Doctor's Pets. And actually the employees, the mole guys on the railroad would tell me this stuff, that he dressed like a doctor with a stethoscope. And so they were 18, 19. They would actually go downtown Savannah, him and his buddies, in their doctor attire and, pretend they were a doctor for a little while, try to get dates. Well, a girl he dated that or whatever worked at the pet store at the time, not my mother, this before my mom, she came later. Her dad was on the railroad. So back then you kind of had to know someone and he helped him get a job way back then.
Yeah.
So it was a good job. He raised a family. My mom was cool. She was younger. She went to Woodstock, which was
That's
pretty
awesome.
cool.
Yeah.
At a young age.
Do you have pictures of that?
Nah,
How cool would that be?
pre-camera phone.
Yeah, that's
Yeah. So some good stories and all. So yeah, they're both raised over there in Savannah in the Barnaventure, Thunderbolt area.
Yeah.
And yeah, they were cool. Great. 4 kids, and then 14 grandchildren. So
Oh wow, 14 grandkids.
yeah,
So where would you say, nowadays if you want to raise 4 kids in Richmond Hill, you've got to be doing financially pretty well.
yeah.
Where would you say you guys fell in the financial spectrum back then?
I'd say middle of the road.
Yeah.
We definitely weren't the wealthiest people in town, not even on our street, but we lived in a great neighborhood, Strathy Hall. We didn't live on the water. We lived across the street from the water. So when you walked out, you could kind of get on your tippy toes and see the river. But I had friends with docks and boats, and that, was unique and cool. But, so it middle class, but what my father told me then is kind of no different where I'm at now as much as probably you do. I know we work probably a million hours, trying to get ahead is what you do as a small business owner. And, like even, he kind of raised us saying, you're only a couple of missed paychecks from the guy on the corner asking for money.
Yeah.
So just remember that and how you treat people and the kind of work ethic. Yeah.
I completely agree. Yeah, I think how you treat people is the way you treat people is a representation of who you are in your heart, right?
Yeah.
So I think whatever you have in here is eventually what comes out of it's just what comes out of you, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's what you hear people say is a byproduct of what they think. So yeah, I think who you are and the way you treat people is extremely important. Um, so what year did you graduate?
I graduated Richmond Hill High in 1999.
Okay. So I imagine leaving here, grew up in Richmond Hill in the 90s, the 80s and 90s,
Mhm.
which I imagine that was just incredible. I believe we were very fortunate in our generation. We got to grow up like we were the last generation that we could do stupid stuff without it being recorded.
Yeah, you're right.
Not every move we made was on camera and documented forever, right? Because it's like once something's on the internet, man, it's there forever. I think our generation is very fortunate to have been able to sort of experience both sides of it. I really feel sorry for the new generation. I hear a lot of people say like these kids have it so lucky, back when we were young, our parents were hard on us and I've made this analogy before, but it's kind of like eating cake. Like it's sweet, but there's no nutrition in it, right? Like it's sweet and yeah, it's delicious and all these things, but it has no nutritional value. Um, like when we grow up, I mean, like for my dad was a janitor, um, and he was one of the hardest working man. I mean, he's that guy that brags about never missing a day. He's never sick, never calls out. You get up, you go to work without cease, without fail. Um, and growing up with my dad, like we ate beans and rice. I mean, like when Hamburger Helper came around, man, it was like
Oh
bro,
yeah,
we ate a lot
yeah,
of Hamburger Helper, a lot of beans and rice.
yeah.
Um,
Love that stuff.
and like the kids in school would want to wear like Hollister, Abercrombie, or my dad's like,
Yeah.
"There's no way I'm buying you a $50 pair of pants. Like it's not happening."
I
He
had
goes,
LA Gear pumps.
"LA Gear,
So
yeah, that's
they
right."
wouldn't give me Reebok pumps. We went to
Yeah,
JC Penney, and then I had LA Gear pumps, which I thought were amazing, but nobody else in school did.
yeah, it wasn't cool
I
in
was the only
school.
guy in Richmond Hill with those.
Yeah, so my dad would like he'd fill up a gas tank. He would buy me gas and let me use his lawnmower. And he's like, if you want to buy Abercrombie or
Yeah,
whatever,
go
here's
earn
some
it.
gas. You can go. And I feel like that's what gave me the work ethic and the ability to grow a business that I have today. Is I think that comes from my dad, where it was I was taught at a young age, if you want something, you got to figure it out, right?
Yeah,
Whatever that looks
yeah,
like. Here's a couple of tools, put them together and make something happen.
yeah.
Um, so for you to get to where you are and doing lobbying, how did that come about? So whenever you graduate, you grew up in Richmond Hill, dad worked for the railroad. What did your mom do?
She had she did several things. The majority of the time, she either taught preschool or she had a home daycare right there in Strathy Hall. And a
Oh
lot of
wow.
people that still live in Richmond Hills, kids are grown now,
Oh,
they
that's
came to her.
special. Yeah.
So I'd ride the bus home, with 10 little boys and girls that, after school.
Yeah.
And we'd all get off on the bus together to go to Miss Pat's, my house. And then, she'd have a couple little toddlers in there running around. And
Yeah, that's
right
awesome.
there,
So
yeah.
your
So
house was like the hangout spot.
for the under 8 crowd.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the under eight crowd.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Um,
So yeah, they
so growing up there, graduate 99,
mhm.
and then what's your next step from there?
Next step was, well, I guess when I graduated and before I graduated, I always had a job. I guess since I was 13, I had a job, and so I'll start with that because that kind of led me down the path I'm on. So I remember in the 8th grade going to Mr. Bing, who was the principal of the Richmond Hill Middle School, and you had to get a work permit to get a job at that age. Like your parents had to sign a form, and before you can go get it, I mean, you could work like for
Mhm.
other people on the table, go get a real job. You
Right.
had to get this work permit. So I remember meeting with Mr. Bing, who was like the nicest human I've ever met. And anybody who was raised in Richmond Hill schools, like Miss Meeks, and then you have Mr. Bing. So Frances Meeks was the principal forever that helped make Bryan County Schools what it is. And then Mr. Bing was her assistant. And then when she retired, he was our principal. And this guy was amazing. He'd still dunk the ball. I think he was like 60 and he'd dunk a basketball. Anyway, I got a job at Tuma's Feed and Seed is what it's called. Mr. Ron Tuma. So we're just past Arby's. I think there's a hotel there now. It was a feed and seed store. So you had everything from cattle feed to dog food to hay to fertilizer to horse trailers, and started working there. And I worked there all the way through high school, along with doing some other stuff like you talked about cutting grass and things like that. And then prior to graduating, my wife now, she wasn't my wife then, my girlfriend, we had a child. So we were the teenage pregnancy, right?
Mhm.
And so we lived through that, and that was hard. So that was hard on her more than me, I would say, right?
Yeah.
Not only the stigma of teen pregnancy, but you're young and you're doing your thing, and got big dreams, and then all of a sudden everything changes. So
Yeah.
that's where the road adversity kind of started for both of us.
And I'm sure religious
Oh yeah.
influence was very strong in Richmond Hill back then. So
Yeah. Very strong. And then, you know, but yeah, so when I got out of high school, so when I graduated in 1999, I moved in with a couple of friends in Georgetown,
Mhm.
split an apartment, and I enrolled at South University, a little private school. And I think I paid on those couple of like that year of classes because that place was crazy expensive. I remember going up there and signing my first student loan. Anyway, South University, and worked at Lowe's right there on Abercorn, and then Logan's Roadhouse is across the street, and the Papa John's down the street delivered pizzas. Worked at all three of them at the same time, and then had my little boy in my Suzu truck, little guy. So I hung out with my friends and all that, but I was a young father. So, I did all the teenage things, but I was able to get up and go to work in the morning and then, do my duty as a father, which, I think helped me understand what other people go through when you see people and what they're dealing with, you know what I mean? Because it is hard. It's hard on when you're young like that, trying to survive and do the right thing.
Yeah.
So worked there, and then the opportunity came up to work on the railroad, and I didn't want. I wanted to do it. My old man didn't want me to, because it's a tough job, and you're going a lot. Great job, great benefits and all that, but he didn't. He's like, man, you don't need to do that. You're gonna be old like me. Nobody wants their kid to be like them. But I did that and worked on the railroad. Great job. Ended up marrying Chrissy, my high school sweetheart, who's mother of my child, years later, and worked on the railroad forever, and was able to, after about 15 years or so, talk my way into lobbying for the railroad workers. So
So what does that mean? Taught your way into?
well, I'm
That's-
a lobbyist.
I
Does a
feel
lot
like
of
you just
talking.
downplayed
Yeah.
what you went through. So working for the railroad,
Yeah.
there had to be something that happened that you were like, okay, I need to fix this.
Well, yeah. So in the railroad industry or big industries like that are unionized. So I worked on CSX Road in Savannah. I was a conductor, and I was the local. After several years, I got involved, with the union, which is basically an association, and you help each other out and you advocate, for pay issues, or if somebody needs to get off work for their kid's birthday, you make sure they get off and that kind of thing, or you know what I mean. Then you pass the hat and help people out when they're down. And so I was that guy in Savannah for a while, and I got the opportunity probably when I was 25, 26 to go up to Atlanta and follow around a guy that was at the Capitol that was a railroad guy too, but he was walking around shaking everybody's hands and, talking to all the politicians, wearing a coat and a tie and not wearing work boots and working at 3 a.m. I was like, man, I could probably do that. He said, well, pay attention, boy. One day opportunity might come up. Fast forward several years, and the opportunity did come up, and actually had to run for office. So it's an elected position. So when I decided to run, I went all around the state, and you had to get elected by all the railroad workers across the state. So that's Norfolk Southern guys and gals, CSX, and then Amtrak. That's the three big entities. So I got elected way back when, and managed to produce some stuff and, work harder than anybody next to me. So I was able to keep that job for a while.
What was that? So to go back just a couple of steps, I'm trying to paint a picture for myself, right? I really just want to get a good understanding um, about how you got to where you are, and part of that, the purpose of this podcast is most of us come from a broken place, right? Like Ridgeway Roofing is a multi-million-dollar roofing business that I built off of 2 grand. I got I was working for a roofer, and he was like, "Look, I'm not going to pay you this Friday." And that was not acceptable.
Yeah.
Not getting, one of those, you're missing one paycheck away from being on the streets. I mean, we have, me and my wife have 5 children. She had quit working because it was, the rushing home, and both of us she wouldn't get off till 6. She worked at Lineage, shipping chicken feet. And we would
Sounds
both
fun.
get off at 6, or sometimes I wouldn't get off until 8 o'clock or whatever, in the roofing industry. And we like run home, and we're trying to get boys. We had 2 boys playing baseball. We had another one, she was I mean, we just had, it was just a lot, right? It's a lot going on, and trying to
Yeah.
rush home and get things together. And then the cost of childcare, it just didn't make sense after she paid her taxes from her work week. It was just going straight to daycare. So I'm like, if you can be home and you can hold down the fort, that'll open me up to go. I want to go make something. The roofer said I wasn't getting paid. I had 2 grand, and I was like, well, I can't take this, right? This is
Yeah.
too big of a risk. I
Yeah.
want to bet on me before I bet on him. And so that's where I started Ridgeway. So what I want to do is I want to paint the picture, kind of where you came from, what you went through. And I want to step back to you guys got pregnant when you were teenagers.
Mhm.
How old were you?
17 when Tristan was born.
Okay. So you're
11th grade.
16 when you find out you're having a baby?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
That's right. Yep.
What was that like at home?
Um, it was difficult. I mean, it wasn't, I mean,
Imagine your mom was a very
yeah,
caring person.
she was very caring, and I was the third child, and my oldest brother, he was, if I can say, the hellion,
Okay.
cool
Right.
dude, but yeah,
Yeah.
he
So he
so
beat
by
him
the
up a
time
little
they
bit
got
for
to
you,
me, they were a little worn out,
Yeah.
and kind of, and that's that independence, like I was like you said, on your own. If I wanted to order a pizza from, wish they were still in business, One Way Pizza, which was in the Sawmill Shopping Center.
Mhm.
I can still remember the guy's voice. I didn't want Hamburger Helper again, but I had a little money,
Right.
and so I put together the $10, and the One Way Pizza guy, he'd say, "One Way Pizza, may I help you?" I still remember his voice, deep voice like Isaac Hayes, and
That's awesome.
anyway, I'd have to do that. But that being said, so yeah, my old man they were not mean about it or anything like that. They were, well, I mean, what are you going to do now?
Right.
And more on the other end, my father-in-law, then he wasn't my father-in-law. He was my girlfriend's dad, who's probably one of the biggest, toughest men ever lived in Richmond Hill, still here, Ennis Hager.
Oh,
Big Ennis.
I love Ennis. Yes,
Big
Ennis and
Ennis.
Lori. Listen, I know Ennis.
Yeah.
I bet that was intimidating.
Yeah, and so back then, 30 years ago, he looked like the Dolph Lundgren on Rocky IV.
Yeah.
So
right.
everybody,
Ennis
all
is
my
still
friends,
intimidating.
oh yeah. So all my friends said he's going to kill you, and kill you.
Right.
So when we go over there, and coincidentally, they lived right near that feed store that I worked at as a teenager. Not sure that had anything to do with it, but anyway, right over there, right behind those Arby's in that area.
Yeah.
And I remember I was sitting down with her to tell him, and I mean, I'm thinking I'm about to cry. She's crying. Here's the biggest, toughest man I've ever seen in my life, and his fatigues from
For the record, just want to say this for the record. Ennis was like, still to this day is known for, there's one guy that you're not going to start anything with.
Yeah.
It's Ennis Hager. I
Yeah.
mean, to this day, I'm not sure how old Ennis is, but I mean, I wouldn't want to scrap with him.
Oh no. And he's also the one guy that if somebody else is messing with you, maybe that's why I'm so soft. Because all these years I've said, well, I'll just call Ennis.
Yeah, I'm gonna call Ennis.
I've been blessed with that. But
Yes.
yeah, so
Okay.
but he you think he'd be angry, you think he'd be, it's this little girl, and he was he was just looked at us and looked, he's like, well, y'all were doing something you should have been doing. A lot of teenagers do that, I understand, but what matters now is, how you handle it and what you do about it. And, he's like, we'll see what kind of man you are and how you treat my daughter and how you treat this child.
Yeah.
And I'll help you every way I can.
What a blessing.
And that was, and he hugged me, and he's
Wow.
been one of my best friends ever since.
Yeah. I bet that
Yeah.
was such a relief of, oh, he's not going to kill me.
Oh, it was. Yeah. 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 It was, I was like, oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Great guy.
Yes.
And,
phenomenal. Yeah. Yeah. Ennis is, we've done several roofs for Ennis and Lori. And,
Yep.
they are, they're fantastic people. And Logan Robertson's, Lori's son. I mean, he's great too. He owns, Richmond Hill Tree Care. Yeah. Great people.
Great
The whole
guys. Yeah. And
Great
then,
people.
Chrissy's moms, who they were married by then, Innocent and Lori, Lori, I mean, awesome, great. Lori's great. And before that, way back when, he was still married to Miss Deborah, his wife, who still teaches the gymnastics here in Richmond Hill.
Wow.
So Miss Deborah Hager Lubert. So
Okay.
like you can't go to El Patro with her without a bunch of little kids running up. Miss Deborah, I think she's
Yeah.
been teaching gymnastics for 40 something years.
Wow.
So, you couldn't have better, I guess, teenage
you had
mom
people
parents.
in your corner, man.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. And then my mom had a home daycare. I mean, it kind of all worked out.
So before we step out to start moving forward to where you are today, who were the other, like, who would you say is the, I think we all kind of have multiple people, right? But there's usually like one or two people that like really helped you get through, that really made a big influence. Who would you say was that main character that kind of kept you between the rails?
Uh, my father,
Mm.
he was calm and cool. I mean, he was funny, and but he'd never lost his cool. Like I've never seen him do what I do. I wish I could emulate it with my children or always calm and cool, and always, wouldn't criticize and wouldn't do anything, but he would ask you a question or, give you some insight that was like 3 days ahead. Like he'd tell you something about a situation you were in. You're like, yeah, I don't, and then 3 days later, realize that he knew what he was talking about. So, and that kind of listening to that and his wisdom and the way he handled it kind of kept me, kept me going.
So you really had some people you had to impress. I mean, you had good people fighting for you. You didn't have a there was no opportunity for letting anybody down, right? I mean, you've got
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can let people down. I mean,
but I mean,
yeah.
for some of us,
Oh, some people didn't.
For
Yeah.
some people, it's like
Oh,
they don't
yeah.
have anybody that's in their corner rooting
Oh,
for them,
yeah.
right? So it's so easy.
That's right.
The playing ground is not level for all of us. Like I had people that I couldn't. I became a father at a young age too, and I think that's a big one, right? Like when you got Jackson is 16, and he's such an incredible young man. And when they're a baby and they're looking at you, and
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
failure's not an option.
That's right.
Like
Yeah.
you have to figure it out.
That's right.
And then especially whenever you have those male figures in your life that,
Yep.
like there's been times when I think I've worked harder for other people
Yeah.
than I ever. I wasn't doing it for me. I was just doing it because I didn't want to let them down.
Yeah.
Right. Like I wanted to show like I've got this. I'm man enough to do this.
And a pride thing, when you're
Mhm.
doing something for somebody else, you want to do it well,
Mhm.
not that they'll say, oh, he did a good job, but just like you want them to be happy,
Yeah.
like, you want to please them with your work. You know what I mean? So you don't
Right.
do it halfway.
Yeah.
I agree.
So you got through, you overcame, um, you get up to Atlanta. So are you still working for the railroad? Like, are you employed by the railroad or are you in?
Employed by the railroad and the labor union.
Okay.
So I was, actually doing the stuff in Atlanta was the employees, the workers,
Mhm.
and they were virtually paying my salary, right? So I'm speaking up for their rights and their safe work conditions.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. That's, what did you see that made that change? I know you had mentioned, you'd kinda the way that things are going and, what did you use to rally up people to vote for you?
Just told them, didn't lie. I learned that. I told them the honest truth that they work hard and they're gone from their families a lot, right? And they have a contract that they were given that says they'll be paid X amount with these benefits to do this job. And in a lot of places across the state, that wasn't happening.
Yeah.
And I was the guy that could get something done about it,
Yeah.
and they
How
believed me. So,
how long were you in that role before you started seeing, "Oh my gosh, I'm doing something?" Like, how long did it
oh,
take
it
for.
took a few years. Yeah,
Mm.
and well, the first obstacle was the union stigma, right? So, I mean, even now, it's still a stigma with some people.
Mhm.
If you're not in a union or you don't know about the labor movement and you only see what you see on the news and things,
Yeah.
or hear from
'Cause
one side
unions
or the
aren't
other.
there's not very many unions in the Southeast, really at all. Like roofing, it's
Yeah.
totally unregulated.
Yeah,
I mean, there's
and there's
nothing.
tons of industries that and businesses that don't need that. I mean, I don't know about, what I mean, roofing may or may not, I don't know, but
Right.
small businesses and things, but some of your bigger companies may need it, right? It's an avenue to file a grievance, an avenue, like I said, I think earlier, to help each other out. That being said, it wasn't very popular in Atlanta. All I knew was all the old men that my old man worked with that lived up and down 144 in Richmond Hill that were old railroad guys.
Mhm.
I knew that. I mean, so when I go up there, I mean, I'm speaking for these guys,
Right.
and I get there, and there's a few legislators that were like, "We don't like unions." Boy, wouldn't even talk to me.
Right.
Like you're trash. Basically.
Yeah, but you really knew it. Like
I
you
knew,
you
yeah,
knew it and you lived it.
yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
thinking, well, they
For
must not know them men
decades.
I'm talking about. They wouldn't talk to them like that. So
Right.
that took a while. So I mean, that just changing that stigma. Like, listen, man,
Yeah.
I work a lot. The people I'm speaking for work. This isn't whatever you're thinking it is. So I
Right.
learned my first lesson lobbying there was, you can think you're right and think you know everything and know a lot about what you're talking about, but you got to have those relationships. They got to trust you. They got to understand. So I learned how to build relationships. So fast forward a couple of those that wouldn't have anything to do with me, some of my best friends now that just didn't know. And, that takes time. So after 2 or 3 years, it took a few years to really learn the process, to learn and navigate that building, to be able to get something done. And, but after that, it was kind of
Yeah, I'm
wide
sure there
open.
were a lot of moments of, "What am I doing?" Like,
Oh yeah. Yeah. Because there's no training for,
yeah.
because most people go to college for that stuff.
Mhm.
You go to Poli Sci, Georgia Southern, or Kennesaw, or UGA, and then you intern in the Senate, and then you get a job, or your family's in it, or you worked for a state senator, a state house rep, and then you
Yeah.
get a job. And I came off the railroad tracks. I didn't know anything, so that took a while, but it
Yeah, you
really
had to
gave.
physically open your doors, right?
Yeah, I mean, it gave me a unique perspective too, because I wasn't just a suit. Like, I actively practiced what I was talking about, and which is pretty cool, and which is a cool, unique thing about that, the working force side, the labor side, right? Because those crafts, like some of your building trades, not necessarily roofers, but you figure your big general contractors or your IBEW, the electricians and all, they have a guy or a gal up there, and those are people that use their tools, and so that gives them a unique perspective.
Yeah, it makes some big difference. What was your first target? When you get up there and you realize like, "Hey, I've got an opportunity. I'm rubbing elbows with all the right people." What was your first, like, "Here we go."
As far as legislation to
Mhm.
pass, or
Yeah.
well, the first thing was to get some recognition, right? And so make people understand not who I was, but who these people that live probably in every county in the state, pretty much. The railroad doesn't touch everywhere like it used to, but it is a lot of folks. I mean, you think with retirees, right? Railroad retirees, and your spouse is considered a retiree, because if you're on the railroad industry, when you retire, your spouse gets their own pension, which
Mhm.
is pretty cool,
That is.
and something they fought for 100 years ago and managed to keep that. So making them understand, that the 20 something thousand retirees and the thousands of railroad workers, their voice matters. And so after doing that, then I guess the first condition and the big issue that we really worked on was making sure these trains that come through town keep 2 people on them. So there was an effort across the country to cut the conductor off the train. So you have an engineer and a conductor driving this train, and they wanted to remove that, and then eventually to automate it, which that sounds great and all, but unsafe, right? And
Very.
to save a little bit of money. So
Yeah.
that was something that we worked on and were able to tackle. Um, Across the nation. So anyway, Federal Railroad Administration ended up putting a rule in to protect the 2 crew members.
That's huge.
Yeah, it was a
I
pretty
mean, you
big
you
deal.
saved, because there's no telling, what that could have turned into. It's amazing to think of how many people that are like you that help us small people on a day-to-day basis that is totally unseen, right? Like, we hear Trump 1,000 times a day, right? We hear, state leaders constantly, local politics, we hear about these people that, I guess I don't wanna say big dogs, 'cause maybe not even really that much more important. It's a combination of all of you guys. I guess I could break it down to like a roofing contractor. People hear Mack Ridgeway often, but they don't hear Chris Vincent and Alan Turner and Delvin Lewis and Tony
Yeah,
Cooper
you
and Matt
see
Tomlinson. They don't hear these
who's
other people.
advertising.
Right. And those are the people that make Ridgeway Roofing run. I just make sure that everything's flowing like it should, right?
Yeah,
Or if there's a big problem that, they don't know the answer to, there's someone that can solve the problem.
yeah,
But those are the people that make Ridgeway Roofing do what it does. It's not me.
yeah.
Yeah, so good for you. I mean, that's you play a huge role in this country, in this state, and in our local environment. I mean, how many jobs did you save by being able to get that passed,
Well,
man?
I
That's
didn't do that by
incredible.
myself.
Right. But
That
you
was
played a part in it.
I played.
Yeah.
We pushed really hard in Georgia, and then thankfully, before it became law, and then we were uphill battle. We were able to
Yeah.
get it done
That's a
in
national thing,
DC.
right?
Yeah. So, but yeah, but like that's why it matters to have an advocate, so not just think railroad, but think any small business should know their legislators.
Yeah.
Right. So you as a small business owner, Story Oak, this small business, your state senator, your state house rep should know where this business is. And I mean, that's the first thing I would do is invite one of those elected people to your storefront or to a job site or to lunch, and you get to know them, not because you want anything out of them, but you learn that lobbying too, that you need to know them before you need them. You can't call for help if they don't know who you are. They're not going to answer the phone. It's another it's another insurance policy or loan you're approved for. They don't know you. Your phone, You're not in the Rolodex. So you get to know them, and then when an issue comes up there in Atlanta, that they hear something affecting roofing or something's affecting, visual effects industry, like we're in this studio. They're like, oh, well, I got a guy in my town. I can call him. Let me get his take on it. Right. And so gives them an avenue, because you figure the people that are elected, they're all smart, a lot of them business people, and they got there for a reason, right? I mean, they ran a race and they work hard and they are successful in whatever they do. And they got picked to go up there. But they may be a doctor, they may be a pharmacist, they may be a farmer, they may be a multitude of things, but so they're not going to know what roofing is. They're not going to know about railroad. They're not going to know about working at the ports. They're not going to know about selling real estate, or they're not going to know about being a nurse. So that's why they require, that's why you need lobbyists or advocacy groups to bridge that gap.
Yeah. Well, it's been great having you on the show. I've really enjoyed hearing the story about Georgia Matters and growing up in Richmond Hill in the 80s and 90s, what that's been like. I know you have a lot more to your story, and I'm looking forward to hearing that on the next episode.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Between the Highs podcast is produced inside Story Oak Studios. StoryOakStudios.com.